All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today, Wednesday, April 5th, for our noon briefing. Sorry, we're a little delayed in getting this going today. Unfortunately, Kelsey Scanlon from the Department of Emergency Management is not going to be able to join us. And so she's asked me to give an update for you all with regard to the Pajaro recovery and progress report we're making there as well. We do have Daniel Gonzalez with us from the Department of Emergency Management, and Laura Emmons should be joining us shortly to talk about, and here she comes, I see her coming online to talk about debris removal. But first, also Karen Smith is here with us, our Public Information Officer from the Health Department. Maya Carroll is on vacation, taking a few well-deserved days off, and so Karen will also be helping to moderate today's briefing. But look, why don't we turn to Daniel while he's on right now. And Daniel Gonzalez has been managing the LAC, the Local Assistance Center in Pajaro. And Daniel, welcome to the briefing. And can you please give us an update on what you're seeing at the LAC and the services that people are looking for and how many families we've served so far?
Good afternoon, everybody. Daniel Gonzalez here at the LAC. We've seen, since the announcement came that the disaster declaration was approved, we've seen an uptick in attendance to the LAC of people coming in and asking about FEMA resources and when they're going to be available. We've been informing them that at this time we're going to be potentially having FEMA present here at the LAC tomorrow, starting at 9 a.m. We are going to be having presence from them. We have been letting them know that there's going to be a DSA, what they call a DSA, which is Disaster Survivor Assistance Center, which is a registration point where residents can come in and begin the process until we have the full-fledged DRC set up, which should take a couple of days. But we are going to be starting the process of getting information from residents, intaking. We've also seen a demand for consulate services. A lot of the residents coming in and asking for documents they may have lost during the flooding. So we're trying to accommodate that. I know the consulate is working to have a mobile consulate present at Pajaro on the 29th of April, where they will be providing services to residents from Pajaro directly. So far, up to this point, we have served 696 households in the LAC that started last week. We're at 696. We are seeing, and like I said, we are seeing an increase in residents coming back to the LAC. We are also providing cleaning kits. We've distributed over 150 cleaning kits that residents are still asking for as they're cleaning their residence. We are providing information about all the services that have been present since the opening of the LAC here. So we're really trying to make sure that when residents come, and even though they're asking for a particular service, that we try to inform them of everything that's available to them here at the LAC. We are actually in the works right now of setting up a community-based resource center. We're looking for a location for that. I know that Roxanne Wilson and some of the team from FEMA and Cal OES have been working on getting the CBOs together to be able to open up this community resource center for families in Pajaro. We will keep you guys posted on that because we are still to secure a location where we can have that. But that's another way that we're trying to support our residents here in Pajaro. Is there anything else in terms of the LAC that you guys would like to know about? Let me know. I'm going to be on the call.
Thank you, Daniel. And just so that people know what the acronyms stand for, the LAC again is the Local Assistance Center. The other acronym that Daniel used is DRC, which is Disaster Recovery Center. And I think it's important to note, Daniel, while we don't have it quite hammered down yet, we are looking at opening up a second location for residents and for businesses in the Salinas Valley that's more conveniently located. So we are looking at a location in Salinas. So we'll keep you posted on that, Daniel. Thank you very much for your report. And then stay with us for a few minutes so while we go to Laura. Okay. We're getting a request, Daniel. Could you repeat some of that in Spanish before we move on to Laura?
Of course, of course. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Daniel González, estoy trabajando aquí en el Centro de Asistencia Local y actualmente estamos trabajando ahorita, hemos servido alrededor de 696 familias que han venido desde que abrimos el Centro de Asistencia Local. Muchas de las personas están buscando asistencia de FEMA desde que abrimos, desde que anunciamos que se aprobó la petición de declaratoria de desastre al presidente Biden. Desde que se firmó la declaratoria, hemos tenido personas que han estado viniendo y preguntando sobre cuándo va a estar disponible los servicios de FEMA. Les hemos estado informando que el día de mañana, a partir de las 9 de la mañana, ya van a estar aquí presentes tomando la información de las personas para poder iniciar el proceso de recuperación. También estamos viendo la posibilidad de abrir un centro de asistencia comunitaria para los residentes, para que puedan asistir a recibir apoyo de las organizaciones sin fines de lucro que están proveyendo asistencia a la comunidad a través de los recursos que las diferentes fundaciones están proporcionando para que la gente tenga acceso a eso. En cuanto nosotros tengamos el lugar y la fecha de apertura, se las vamos a comunicar para que sepan a dónde tendrán que asistir.
Great, thank you, Daniel. And also, I did put in the chat, Karen Smith also put a link in the chat, and then I did put the information from FEMA, so people can actually start to apply for disaster assistance either by phone or online. And that's a very important thing that we want to get across the entire region. So thank you for paying attention to that. Adriana Fredericks from Univision had a question about the Veterans Hall and the community-based organizations. So the community-based organizations will be primarily nonprofits, and there will be a different group that we are working on, as Daniel said, trying to find a location in Pajaro for that. At the LAC, the Local Assistance Center, primarily are state agencies as well as county agencies, with a few nonprofits there that are actually directly involved in rendering disaster recovery and assistance, for example, the Red Cross. So let's turn to Laura Emmons now, who is also with the Department of Emergency Management, and she is the super efficient debris coordinator and manager for Pajaro. So Laura, welcome to today's briefing.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for that introduction. So we have made some very fantastic and exciting progress in our residential debris removal program. As of my most current numbers, we have removed around 4,500 tons of debris, which is certainly not a small amount of debris. We currently are still doing residential curbside pickup. We have completed our first full pass, meaning we have at least hit every impacted home once and picked up debris, and we're working on a second pass. We also have our drop-off site open 8 to 4 Monday through Saturday. This weekend, though, due to Easter, it will not be available on Saturday, but will reopen on Monday. We are anticipating trying to conclude our first formal run at all the debris by the end of April. So we will be asking residents to get all of their debris on the curbside by April 24th. Depending on the need, we will probably take a pause after April and decide if additional runs are needed to pick up debris as people might complete more advanced gutting on their home. We are also working to get street sweepers out in the community to pick up really any remaining amounts of debris that may have been left behind on the curb. And we are also, there are volunteers. If residents are looking to connect with more resources to help and muck and gut their homes, the volunteers are staged at the Pajaro Middle School and are available to help residents who may need more assistance with getting progress on their home and getting that debris on the curbside. And I'm available for any questions.
Thank you very much, Laura. Chris, you're off mute, so if you could please mute your device, I'd appreciate it. Chris Counts, if you can hear me, thank you, sir. All right, Laura, we have a question in the chat from Victor Guzman. Supervisor Lejla mentioned that Cal OES is still working on funding to help undocumented who otherwise would qualify for FEMA assistance. Is there progress on the update of that? Any sense of what the process, when the process will actually start? Also, he's asking 3 weeks ago when the levee breached. I'm not sure what you're asking, Victor, there.
The reason I ask is because it was very evident three weeks ago that when the levee breached, that this would happen, that there would be some folks that are undocumented there that wouldn't qualify for FEMA assistance. So that's why I'm kind of curious why Cal OES is, and this is mostly from what Alejo said, was that Cal OES is working on getting funding still 3.5 weeks later to help those that are undocumented who wouldn't qualify for FEMA assistance. Just what the progress update on that is. And when that process actually started.
Okay, I'm not sure if any of us on this call could answer that question right now because we can't speak for Cal OES. And I don't believe anybody from Cal OES has joined us. What I can do, Victor, is I'd be happy to, I will put you in contact with the Cal OES spokespeople after this call. If you want to hang on for a minute, I'll write down your question and I'll send it directly to them. Is that acceptable, sir?
Sure, thanks.
My pleasure. And going back to the Easter, obviously you all know that this weekend is Easter. And additionally, I think it's important to note that the local assistance center is going to be closed for Easter as well. This is at the request of many of the residents and folks volunteering. So they are going to be closed for the Easter weekend as well. That's correct, right, Daniel?
Yes, that is correct. We are going to be closing Friday at 7, and we will be reopening the LAC Monday at 9 a.m.
Okay, great. And then Kelsey Scanlon was not able to be with us on the phone. I'm going to give her update as best I can, and of course, I'm going to ask Laura and Daniel to fill in for anything that I miss. At the present time, the hygiene hubs are still very much active and being utilized every day. And they will continue with laundry service and the shower facilities and restroom facilities. Medical care is being provided at those hubs as well, at Pajaro Park and at Pajaro Middle School, as well as at the shelter. So that those services continue to take place for the residents of Pajaro. As Daniel has mentioned, there's been a lot of discussions with FEMA as they start to come into the picture. We have set up a page on our website, the county's website, that has FEMA resource information, some of which is in Spanish, most of which is in English. We are waiting for FEMA to get us the Spanish versions of their documentation. So that apparently is taking a little bit of time, but we are working on that as quickly as possible. I did post one of the things in the chat for you all. You're able to download that in the chat. Also, with regard to the shelter, we've been trying to lay a rumor to rest here. We're not closing the shelter, folks. The shelter is not being closed. The shelter will remain open until we have a solution for the needs and assessment of the needs of long-term housing. So the space configuration is changing at the shelter. Not because we want it to change, but it has to change due to the needs of the Santa Cruz County Fairgrounds. So we are consolidating one smaller area of the shelter, but the shelter facilities will remain open. As of last night, our census at the shelter was 262 residents or guests last night, and so we are keeping we're keeping stats on that every day. Let's see. I think that's pretty much what Kelsey was going to report on. I'm going to turn it over now to Karen's. Victor, go ahead and ask your question. Then I'll turn it over to Karen.
Sorry, Nick. Thank you. Is that consolidation going to impact capacity at all?
No, the consolidation will not impact capacity. If you're familiar with the fairgrounds, there was a smaller building we were using we were calling it the Resource Center. There was nobody was sleeping in that particular facility. And that's the facility that the fairgrounds needs to have back.
Nick, I just wanted to share something. I just realized the question that Victor was asking about the rapid recovery funds.
Uh-huh.
Those are tied to FEMA those are tied to FEMA coming into play. So the rapid recovery funds are meant to cover any gaps that FEMA funding or the FEMA individual assistance or other type of assistance they're providing doesn't cover. The rapid recovery funds are tied to that, and they come from the state DSS, the California Department of Social Services, but they're tied to FEMA. So if FEMA doesn't get, and now they are engaged, they will be present at the DRC or the LAC, but they only come into play once FEMA declares, or once there's a disaster declaration. Just want to clarify that.
Thank you, Daniel. Appreciate that. And then also to clarify something for Ray from the Monterey County Weekly. So both FEMA and SBA will be at the community resource centers. We have been in contact with both. We've heard from them today. And also I did provide to all the local media a list the other day of the contact people for FEMA, Cal OES, and SBA. If you did not get that list, please contact me after the briefing, and I'll be happy to make sure you get that list so that you can direct those specific questions to those agencies. We're really trying hard not to be spokespeople for them. We can only speak on behalf of the county of Monterey. So thank you very much for that question, Ray.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just wanted to, maybe Daniel has some insight into it, just like, just so keep track of all these different centers and this is like, basically hubs to give people the help they need. Just kind of curious, you have the LAC right now. You mentioned, I think, the Disaster Recovery Center and then also a community resource center that sounds like maybe it's kind of tied more to federal aid. I'm just kind of curious, like, how many different kind of outposts are we talking about here that you guys are setting up, and what do they each allow you to do differently as far as getting aid to the folks?
Right. So right now, the LAC, the Local Assistance Center, is managed by local agencies. That'd be the county and Cal OES. As Daniel said, that we are working with FEMA to determine when they're going to take over the LAC, and that will then transfer over to a Disaster Survivors Assistance. That's their name for it, but essentially it's the federal version of a LAC. Okay, so it's a name change. They are inspecting the building right now to make sure it's going to meet their needs. If not, they will have to they'll find another building. The community-based organizations that are being worked on are nonprofit organizations, and those would be housed in a separate location. As Daniel said, Roxanne Wilson and Krista Haney have been very involved with that process and the liaison with the community-based organizations, so they will have their own facility. And then finally, when we do open one up in the Salinas area, which will be a disaster resource center, a recovery center, all these locations that FEMA will manage will be one-stop shops. Okay, Ray? So we're not asking people to go here and go there. We're trying to establish locations that are convenient for the people that were most impacted in this terrible disaster. So it sounds like multiple locations, but it's really not. It's name changes and acronym changes that the federal government uses differently than what we use. Is that?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So we're basically talking about basically the LAC you have now, maybe another one in Salinas, and maybe a separate outpost for nonprofits to kind of help them, like three facilities. And that would be close to Watsonville, basically, or Pajaro?
Yeah, so the local assistance center, which will convert over to FEMA managed in the coming days, will stay somewhere in the vicinity that it's in now, either in the same building or some close proximity to that. Our county staff are working very hard on trying to identify a location in Pajaro for the community-based organizations, so we can host them there in Pajaro. So kind of keep it all kind of close. But as you all know, that this disaster didn't just impact the community of Pajaro, it had impacts up and down the Salinas Valley. So that's why there's a strong need, and by the way, the coast too, Big Sur, there's a strong need to have a location that's more central for those folks. And so that's why we're hoping that we will be opening one up in Salinas, or the FEMA will be opening one up in Salinas. And we're hoping it's going to be in the same place it was in the January storms. Does that answer your question, Ray?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right, my pleasure. All right, so let me turn it over to Karen Smith now, and she's going to introduce our next guest to talk about legal assistance for renters. Go ahead, Karen, take it away. Karen,
I'm freezing up from time to time.
okay.
Hush. Okay, so with this disaster, there's a lot, we had 75% of the people who were affected were renters. And there's often things come up between renters and landlords, and there's some workshops going on in the community to help facilitate that. And where did she go? Uh-oh.
I'm right here.
Okay, so I'm gonna let you introduce yourself because I do not want to butcher your name. So go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Lejla Bratovic, and I'm the Executive Director for the Conflict Resolution Center of Santa Cruz County. And I have been helping to coordinate the efforts for the legal aid, specifically as it relates to housing. So we have been working for a couple of weeks already together with the legal aid organizations and mediation organizations across the two counties, both in Santa Cruz and Monterey. We have put together brochures with information and helping to answer some frequently asked questions for both landlords and tenants, because we understand so many tenants have been left unhoused, but at the same time, the landlords' properties have been affected. So we understand that there's going to be a lot of issues happening at no fault of either the landlord or the tenant. So how do we find the solutions of that possible return, if the return is possible, relocation, if that's the better option for a tenant, or even the repairs that need to happen, and who is responsible for what, how much, and all of those details of legal details of landlord-tenant rights and responsibilities. So far, we have offered 2 workshops specifically tailored towards the tenants, and we have had pretty large turnouts. About 60, I would say, at our first one, and about over 100, well over 100 for the second one. We have also CRLA has issued a brochure, and bilingual brochures. All the materials have been issued bilingually for the tenants, also with some frequently asked questions, along with the letters that need to be included for any communication with the landlords as well. This Thursday, tomorrow, at the Ramsey Park Family Center, we are offering the same workshop for the landlords, and this is available both in person, preferred, but knowing that some landlords might not be around, we're also offering this via Zoom, so that landlords can join and learn more about what their responsibilities are, what their rights are, how they can move forward from this. And then the following 2 Thursdays on April 13th and 20th, we will have also open sort of mediation clinics or consultation clinics, where we're already having a good response from law students, attorneys, all of our organizations, mediators, to come and volunteer and sit there between 3 and 7 and help answer any questions, review the different situations, because every situation we can provide general information, and then every situation is really unique to them, and also facilitate this assistance to how to communicate, to reaching some sort of agreement on a specific solution for each landlord-tenant situation. So whether you're a landlord or a tenant, you can just either contact ahead of time or just call us, and we can just facilitate that conversation towards some agreement, what that looks like, because we understand most cases are going to stay out of the court, and that's the better way to stay out of the court. And a lot of this is how can we work out what's best for us, and we can provide that assistance. So some of the organizations that have been behind of this movement are Senior Legal Services. Community Bridges is organizing a lot of the logistics and providing information on their sites, La Manzana. They're also at the LAC, so you can get a lot of information there. Monterey College of Law, CRC, CRLA, Senior Legal for both Monterey and Santa Cruz County, Center for Community Advocacy, really all of the organizations around. So we have those legal aids, but we also have the mediation organizations, which we're not really there to advocate for one or the other side. We're there to help people come to agreeable solutions. So please join us any of these. I have a flyer. I don't know if I can put it in the chat, the flyer.
Sure.
And hopefully we're really looking for a good turnout with the landlords and these future clinics as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lejla. And why don't you put your contact information in the chat as well, because I think that would be important, and a phone number. Of course, Victor's beat me to it. So go ahead and put your phone number and your contact information in the chat so people can reach out to you. And some of the folks might want to attend your seminar tomorrow. Okay. All right, great. And Karen, you're going to go ahead and introduce our next speaker and the next topic.
Well, the next topic is National Public Health Week. And because I am the Public Information Officer for the Health Department, I've been tasked to talk a little bit about it. So this year's theme is, I have to look because I'm going to say it wrong if I don't. Centering and celebrating cultures in health. So we all know that being part of a community makes a big difference in your health. And certainly we can see that in Pajaro. What has made them more resilient is that the feeling of community and being connected. And that makes a difference in your mental health, your physical health, everything. So we're celebrating that. And, you know, it's one of those things we adjust and we adapt, and we just went through a few years of quarantine, and, you know, a lot has changed. So community is at the core of often what we do. And certainly when we provide services, we want them to be culturally appropriate for the groups that we're providing. So we're celebrating it. There's some themes for this week: mental health, rural health, things that are very important to those of us here in Monterey County. So that's really what it is. We're just celebrating public health and the health of the community. And we're just encouraging everybody to step in and do what would make our world a more equitable, safe, healthy, and just place. So that's at the core of Public Health Week this year. And then I want to just put in a plug for the health department's other big celebration. Is we are turning 100 years old this year, and the health department was founded with $10,000, $5,000 from the general fund, and $5,000 from the general fund, and $5,000 from the Rockefeller Foundation. So you know, it's a big celebration. There's a lot has happened in Monterey County for 100 years, but at the core, it's the community and providing services to the community. So we just invite you to join us in working on equity in the community.
Yeah, and it's important too that we talk about this, because it's been at the center of what we've been trying to provide to people in Pajaro. As Karen mentioned, it's, you know, community is important to people's health, and partnering with organizations like Clínica de Salud.
Of her two youngest children. The kids disappeared in 2019 before their bodies were found on their stepfather's Idaho property. Once the jury is selected, the trial could take up to 8 weeks. Now, an investigation is underway in D.C. following the deadly shooting of a teenager by U.S. Park Police. Newly released body camera video shows a Park Police.
Yeah, okay, sorry about that. So as to Karen's point, we have had mental health professionals, behavioral health professionals out at the shelters, at the LAC as well, providing services to the community, and including Clínica de Salud, who's providing medical and dental help to folks. And we have clinics at both locations. So the idea of National Public Health Week and providing public health to the residents of Pajaro is very important to the county, and hopefully the residents are finding some benefit in that. So thank you for bringing this to our attention. So if we have time for questions right now. If you have any questions, you can either raise your hand or put them in the chat. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Dr. Moreno is on if you have COVID questions.
Okay, great. Victor, go ahead.
Yeah, this is for Leia, actually. It was about, oh, let me lower it real quick. This is for Leia. It was just more so about some of the, I don't know if you could speak generally about some of the concerns that had come up out of these meetings from the tenants. I don't know if you're able to share any of that, but yeah, that's all.
Well, yes, the general concerns have been, am I required to pay rent? And yes, there is general information, and it's really specific case by case. So also, what about the back rent? Most people have paid their March rent, and the disaster took place on March 10th. So that leaves 2/3 of the month that the place was uninhabitable. So how do we resolve that? And that's going to be a lot of that communication directly with the landlords and making those plans and agreements. Also, who is responsible for the repairs and the cleanup? And so if it's the structure, the landlord is, if it's the house, the property, the landlord is mainly responsible for that, and the contents of the house is the tenant's responsibility. And again, there are variations to that as well, but those are sort of just general issues. And there has been a lot of questions around FEMA. There has been a lot of questions. What if you don't have a lease agreement? Are you still under lease? And if there has been exchange of money for the place, that's considered a lease as well. Verbal leases are, verbal contracts are also possible. Or legal. And the relocation fees also, we talked about, a lot of people are saying, well, the landlord said we cannot come back in 2-3 months or even a year and a half until things are repaired. So what now? And for the most part, it's like, yes, it's probably time to start looking for different housing if that's possible. And I think this is where the county comes in to provide some of those longer term housing situations until the places are repaired, the properties are repaired and rentable. But this tenant that has been displaced would have a first opportunity to rent the place again once it is repaired. But again, that all has to be communicated ahead of time. So the big message we're trying to say also, a lot of things, if you just don't pay if you're a tenant and you just don't pay a rent and you don't say anything, you don't provide a notice, that's not very good. You can then receive a notice, a 30-day or 15-day or even a 3-day notice to pay or quit. And that, triggers a court process eventually. And so we're also asking people, if you do receive any notices, come talk to us. We can hopefully get that resolved outside of the court. That's better for both the landlord and the tenant, faster process and a more agreeable process as well. So.
And sorry to jump in, I know Ray has a question, but is there some other unique situations? I'm assuming there's some folks that maybe there's like some ADU situations. I don't know if that's also come up in the area too.
I mean, they're the same. It's the same concepts. The only ones that are really a lot more tricky are the situations with like mobile homes and trailer parks, where that is the owners are usually people who are in the mobile parks, but they're renting the land underneath. So those are quite tricky, and I don't even want to try to answer those because I don't have the legal background. And they are really kind of case by case basis or park by park basis. Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Go ahead, Ray.
Yeah, Lejla, a question for you just about the recent eviction moratorium. I mean, is that something that landlords have had questions about as well? Is that something that I'm sure you've been communicating to tenants as well as far as their rights are concerned? But just kind of curious how that kind of changed the dynamic on the ground and just how important that is and how that kind of helps. If you could speak to how that kind of helps maybe alleviate the situation.
Yes.
Given just your thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for that question because I didn't mention it. So as you all know, last week, the Board of Supervisors in Monterey County has passed an ordinance for eviction protection. And we have been really careful to say that it is not a moratorium. So it's not like the protection that was in place during COVID-19, because that was a blanket protection and you didn't have to do or say anything. This is really an ordinance that protects the tenants in court, as it's a defense in court, basically. So if you are a tenant and you cannot pay rent because you have been affected by these disasters, then you have to let your landlord know that. You had to let your landlord know that as soon as possible. I know the ordinance passed just with the turn of the month and new rent due. So let the landlord know as soon as possible, or 15 days before the rent is due, that you cannot pay the rent because you have lost your income and you have been affected by this by the disaster. And then the landlord technically cannot charge rent until this ordinance is in place until August 31st. So with the possibility of extension. This doesn't mean that the rent will never be due. The rent will still be due. It's just that there's a possibility to offset some of those payments, not to have to pay right away and be evicted, but rather when people are able to find work or receive some rental assistance funding that's available in the community as well. So that's a short answer.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, there's one point I wanted to make that I failed to make also is the MST transportation, free transportation in Pajaro continues, everyone. So we are providing free transportation to and from the shelter to the local assistance center, and in the community of Pajaro, we are providing transportation via MST to the local assistance center from the community of Pajaro, as well as a bus route, especially for the community of Pajaro, so people can get around with ease. That's the only thing I think I forgot to mention earlier. Okay, if there's no other questions, Dr. Marino was on also if anybody had any COVID questions, but I don't see any COVID questions coming in the chat. So Dr. Marino, you got lucky today. So thank you so much for joining us on today's briefing, and we'll see you back here next week at noon. Have a great rest of your day.